And before I start, an important issue, and Pascal already mentioned this aspect, in Agenda 21 for Culture, Culture 21, I think what is quite clear is that cultural policies on a local scale are justified. Agenda 21 justifies local cultural policies in order to fulfill the rights to culture of citizens. It's not a document that was drawn up to justify the existence of culture for other reasons, for town planning reasons or for economic reasons. We think it's obvious that local cultural policies have to be related to local action and to cultural rights, the rights to participate in the cultural life of a city or town. And what we find ourselves faced with, what you find, what cities find themselves faced with when drafting cultural policy is this paradigm. It's a triangle. And it's a paradigm of the 20th century that is incremental in nature. The economic angle appeared in the 18th century. In the 19th century, we had equity, the fight against poverty. And at the end of the 20th century, we find the third angle, which is the environment. So in this paradigm of culture, if I were to say, where does culture lie here? I'm sure you would all give me a different answer. Some people would say, well, it's in the social area. Others would say it's in the economic area. Others would say it's all three of these things. It's everywhere. We would have different responses, and I'm sure that the responses would be very interesting. Agenda 21 over the past few years has opted for broadening this paradigm for territorial development to ensure that culture becomes the fourth angle in development. We think that the triangular paradigm is insufficient because we don't define what a territory is. We omit and ignore certain elements that are related to the branding of a city, for example, although I don't really like this term. And this paradigm, neither is it useful to understand things from a distance. We're talking about a world where we have cultural diversity. We have to understand that if we don't protect languages throughout the world, everybody in the world is going to lose quality of life, is going to lose the possibility of communicating with their brothers and sisters throughout the world. The work of Marta Sen and other authors over the past 20 years reminds us, well, remember that the triangular paradigm was good for the end of the 20th century, but since 1987, 1990, we have developed other concepts. Development is freedom. Montesquieu spoke about this in the 18th century and said freedom is to increase the scope of a person. So we are no longer enclosed in this triangle and a triangular policy. Now we have to be in this square, this, and so we have to ensure that we have a seat at this table, whether we're talking about a city or the world or a continent. So we have a document that we've been using for some months now. to try to ensure that in the Rio summit that we can talk about this relationship between culture and sustainable development. It's going to be very difficult. The cultural sector is still a very disconnected, fragile sector, and they will find it difficult to align themselves with this for some reason. They're reluctant. And the French ambassador for the environment said, this issue of the culture as the fourth pillar is not an issue for Rio 20, rather for Rio 40. But I think we have to participate in the struggle to put culture in the center of territories, because the cultural system makes a great contribution to a country. Creativity, memories, many issues where there is no human development. So we should be convinced that this is the path we have to follow. So very briefly, I'd like to mention a few elements that are related to institutional innovation. And we have to make this paradigm for development something that is operational. It's not something that is based on what the New Zealand government or the integrated sustainability plans in Canada or what the Swedish government is looking at. So this isn't just a brainy theoretical issue. It's not just something that's conceptual, or something that has been approached in theory. It's something that is being implemented in many places, but it needs a more in-depth study to implement this theory on a local level, on a national level, and it requires ambitious cultural policies that are not reductionist and will help the obvious sectors and will underline its clear role in economic development. There are always opportunities for institutional innovation. The plan nowadays has to be more ambitious. It has to impulse institutions to undertake a commitment. We can find ways to project a territory on an international level. There are many elements, and I'll conclude by giving you an unusual example of innovation when a territory doesn't have authorities that are courageous enough to have a strategy that is ambitious. Citizens themselves have to form platforms that will make proposals to the administration for them to follow this path. And although they may not follow this path in the short term, if civil society continues its work, the administration will eventually implement these strategies. So I leave you with these reflections. I'm sorry that I was so short of time, and I'll be quite happy to answer any questions either here in the room or later when we have a break.